In the session that I brought, we focused on the evolving need of identity and access management, especially in a distributed context. If looking back, a lot was focused in IAM, a lot was focused in the past on controlling internal in the applications, in the organizations, who could access what type of applications on different platforms, using user information and credentials that were under the control of the organizations, and provide some way of single sign-on. We see this evolving very rapidly to a much more distributed environment, where it's not just within the company, but it's also outside the company. Working with cloud, accessing cloud-based applications, accessing applications that may reside at business partners where we work together, and more using identities that are not even anymore managed by the organization itself, but are rather in the hands of external and under the control of the user itself, not by the organization, offered by cloud-based identity providers, so-called. That is, in a nutshell, the field that we are addressing, and a particular aspect of that is that this is a very rapidly changing world. It is changing almost every day. New applications come up, new cloud providers, a new way of controlling the identity of users, and you need to be able to, in a flexible way, adapt to this evolution without recoding stuff, without extensive configuration changes. So we have based that on a policy-based solution, so that by changing the policy, we can adapt the system to the user's need and to the policies of the organizations, and not the other way around. Yeah. And do that in a dynamic way, so that we not just take into account who that user is, but also what the present context is of a transaction or a session, so that we also take into account where this user wants to go in this particular case. Is it an internal application? Is it an external application through some federation contact? And also, what is the context? Where is this user working now? Is he within the organization? Is he working on a device that we know from before, or is it all of a sudden a new device that we haven't seen before? I mean, that makes a lot of difference in the decision making of, first of all, how you're going to validate the identity of that person, and secondly, what type of access you will provide that user for that particular session. So it's about real-time decision making, and not based on some predetermined model on beforehand. It doesn't work anymore in this distributed context.
A number of things you said are about, I suppose, pace of change and the ability to then react quickly to that. What are some of the challenges that you've heard the CIOs sharing at this event around particularly those areas, but others you might also have identified? What are some of the key challenges that you've uncovered in the last day and a half?
There are multiple challenges that CIO are facing. It is, of course, the diversity of platforms. In almost every organization, you see some movement to cloud, whatever that means, be that a private cloud or be that using cloud services from third-party providers. Yeah. But you can't change the world overnight. I mean, in a lot of these applications that have been there for a long time, you can't just change them and move them. So it will remain a challenge to mix that local and external environment and keep that transparent for the end user, because the last thing you want is that, and what they want is that end users are confronted with all these challenges. I mean, the organization has to solve it. For the end user, it has to remain as transparent as possible. That is a big concern of many of the CIOs. In moving to this external world, cloud world, a concern is, of course, also about the security aspects around it. A lot of CIOs are afraid of putting identity data in a cloud environment. Inherently, it is felt less secure than if you keep it under your own control. So you have to find solutions to merit the need for both, to have some cloud-based offering, but still keep and control yourself of your user data and all related aspects like credentials and so on to users. And that is very important also in today's world where GDPR is coming up to us, to all of us, and CIOs need to address that need. So they want to be able to exercise control themselves as much as possible and not just give it to a third party.
Yeah, absolutely. It's GDPR is a big challenging area.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, GDPR has an impact on lots of things. It has some impact on what we do, of course, but we're in GDPR terms, we're in the processing data. We're not in the data management part. But the fact that we offer CIOs the ability to use the platforms that they have already been securing and not having to create yet another platform with user data is an advantage, also in the GDPR context.
Yeah, absolutely. Lastly, Marc, what would be, I suppose, kind of 2 or 3 top tips or key takeaways that you would want to share with CIOs about how identity access management can enable their transformation? What would be 3 top tips, perhaps, or a few?
Yeah, there are a number of steps in where CIOs can address these needs. Of course, this world is changing rapidly, and it's about big changes. I mean, so you have to, in most cases, you have to take it step by step. We very much advise our customers to, first of all, make an inventory of in-house existing platforms, applications, list whatever external service they want to use, define their policy to how the organizations want to control who gets access to what, in what circumstances, and in what way the identities of these users in these particular cases need to be addressed. That's a policy, and we advise users to first of all think about what their security and business policy is. And then afterwards, we will translate it into a platform policy. And that's our strength. I mean, and in doing so, you can also make it in a way where you can easily adapt to new aspects that are coming in. Maybe new applications that somewhere in the cloud, or new user communities. So think about maybe a merger or an acquisition. So you have to be able to cope rapidly with these changes, and by putting everything in a policy context, it's much easier to adapt policies than to adapt codings and configuration files and all these kind of things. Policies, in our view, is the way to go to address these needs towards the future.